And a very warm welcome to our review of the year that was 2019. Our programme today comes from the in-town offices of Llanelli Online, and I'm joined by its editor, Alan Evans. Alan, thank you very much for making us welcome at your new office.
Croeso, prynawn da.
And diolch yn fawr. Now then, this year's been an interesting year for many, many reasons, and I know you've got a rich archive of material, of stories that have featured on Llanelli Online and Wales News Online over the last 12 months. Start us off, what with the beginning of the year, January, what were the kind of stories that were happening?
Well, obviously the eclipse of the moon was a big one across the world. People were looking at that and taking photos of that. We got some lovely pics of that sent in. It's always a big occasion, isn't it?
I think if I remember rightly, the weather wasn't all that clever, though.
No, it was pretty bad, but we did get some nice pics, and there were some cracking shots online. We had a murder, unfortunately, in Ponta de Lais, an elderly lady there, and that was in the news for quite some time when they were seeking the person involved, really. So that was quite a sad story there. We had the toll gate in Machanis. The council decided to put up a gate to stop any access to the path other than walk or bicycle, that, we likened that to the the Rebecca riots then, and I know Mark Jennings, our cartoonist, did a fantastic cartoon that got a lot of response, not least from one of the councillors involved, who really didn't like seeing a cartoon which he believed was a representative of himself.
Yeah, well, it was a pretty hot subject as well, from what I remember, because people were quite upset by it, I think, really, weren't they?
Yeah, it was. A lot of people had used that, it was a little temporary car park, and then when they blocked it off, they put yellow lines down, and it was a bit of a hazard because people coming around the corner there. I don't know. There was a lot of bad feeling in the community. I think the gate is still there. I don't think anyone's ripped it down as yet. We had county lines as well. I mean, that was a massive ongoing issue of county lines gangs coming into Llanelli, across Wales really, nationally, parachuting people into houses, paying for them, giving them TVs, computers, money, all sorts of things in exchange, obviously, for dealing drugs. And the police did clamp down heavily on that, as you saw.
Yeah, they had some significant results in
massive,
the year with that, didn't
massive.
they? But the worrying part about it is it's still going on, though, isn't it?
Yeah, up until the end of this year, we're still getting reports of county lines drugs, Operation Timia, things like that. We cover a lot of the police stories. Closer to home, we had the Delta Lakes pollution. We had the RUP report outlining basically that the site for this new proposed Delta Wellbeing Centre had been a dump for all sorts of things, including asbestos. What's the deadly one? The cyanide and metals and arsenic. That's it. Right, yeah. I mean, it was just horrendous when you read the reports, and it's still going ahead,
There's not just the problems under the ground, though. I think they've had a lot of other issues which have affected the funding levels.
Yeah, money, obviously the police investigation, the raiding of homes involving, allegedly, people involved with that. I think it was Mark Clements that was sacked, and a couple of other people removed while there are still ongoing police investigations, I believe. We never know. I don't know. Will it be built? Let's see.
Okay. What other stories were sort of bubbling around at the beginning of the year, just to sort of whet our appetites for what was to come later?
February we had the Banksy, which had been in Port Talbot. Obviously, we'd seen a Banksy in Port Talbot, and then we got a message saying, look, we think there's a Banksy in Llanelli, and it still hasn't been resolved as to whether or not that was a Banksy. It was
really nice if it was.
It was a little mouse, I think it was, or a rat that was painted on the library wall just outside there, and somebody paid for it to be covered up with some perspex, and nobody sort of accepted or denied that it was a Banksy, and a lot of people obviously took to social media claiming it might be theirs, or that this was a ridiculous story. But you could have said that about the Port Talbot one, really. Until somebody comes forward, until it's investigated and researched, and we get the confirmation, and then that's the way it is. We had the half marathon day, obviously, in Llanelli, and that was a massive event. Always a lot of events now coming to Llanelli in the Millennium Coastal Park there, and they happen throughout the year, attracting thousands of people to the town. Unfortunately, they tend to be on a Sunday, so we don't really benefit from that influx of the population. I'm sure Trostre does, but the town centre itself doesn't, whereas Superhero Day in Llanelli, that's something that does bring the people in. Thousands of people come in for that, and it's part of Llanelli's bid. Very successful, holding events throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, lots and lots of people have supported the events throughout the year, which is really, really nice. It does bring the community together, which I think is something which Llanelli needs.
It's quite unusual walking down the road and you come face to face with like 20 Batmen or Batwomen or Superman and Spider-Man. They're everywhere.
They were just never around when I was growing up.
No. Yeah, I mean, we sort of going into March, and what was an interesting one was Harry Redknapp came to Llanelli, the winner of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. He'd been booked by Llanelli for this dinner way before he'd won the competition, so he had to honour that. Yeah, and he came down, in his car, in his suit. He was asked a few questions and given a speech, but he didn't stay that long. And our reporter Ewan Lewis managed to catch up with him in his car and get an exclusive interview, so he was quite pleased.
Fantastic. That's what local news is all about, though, isn't it? To get those kind of offbeat kind of little sort of snatches of.
Well, it's big names, really. Sam Bailey came to the theatre to do a little concert for the Co-Couriad, and she spoke to us. We contacted her and we did a big piece in the magazine, big piece in the paper, and lovely lady, gave us plenty of time, plenty of photos, and she was posing for photos with somebody. So, Llanelli does attract some of the big names. The theatre there certainly does.
Okay, we'll be back in just a minute. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other stories that have been featuring in the news and making the headlines here in Llanelli Online over the last 12 months. We're looking back at the year of 2019, and joining me is Alan Evans, who's the editor of Llanelli Online and Wales News Online. Alan, we've talked a little bit about some of the big stories and the big things that have happened that were grabbing people's attention at the beginning of the year. We're sort of midway through the year now. We're sort of working in chronological order through the year. What was sort of following on from the sort of the March part of the year from then on?
Well, I mean, I'll just quickly stick in March for a second, because these were big stories in Llanelli. With New Dock, there were men trapped down a hole in New Dock Road and the waterworks, and we got exclusive, again, film and pictures of that for, it appeared on the BBC as well. So that was one. The armed police with a crossbow in Seaside, somebody fired a crossbow.
Yeah, there was a bit of a reaction to that. There wasn't a bit, people were getting really uptight about
a lot of armed police on the streets in Llanelli last year in 2018 and this year in 2019 as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Seaside residents themselves were getting a little bit upset about it.
They really did go to town because of the hassle that the shop owner there was getting as well. And they did sort of form not a vigilante group, but a community group that wanted to do something about it, and they have. All fairness to them. In April, we had the James Bond story. The guy in the market there on the fruit and veg stall, Steve, came up with this thing that he was related to the original James Bond. The documentation sort of bore that out, but the guy who actually knew, apparently, the writer Fleming and so on, said that this was a load of rubbish. But we saw the gravestone, we saw all the items, the militaria, the records, which had been released obviously after the 50-year limit and so on, and there's still some that haven't been released.
There was quite a bit of national interest.
He went everywhere. He went to New York, he went to Cyprus, he went to Greece, he went to Boston, he went all over the world. It was a great story.
And obviously I think it's one which people will still question and sort of ask more and more about, because obviously people are interested in that. Everybody likes a Bond story, don't they?
Yeah, there was a massive storm that blew all this rubbish over Llanelli. People were talking about, do they put their bags out? Do they not put their bags out? And they put their bags out, and Llanelli was a real mess.
Yeah, I remember that. There was blue bags everywhere. There were people collecting. There were, in fact, I think I remember seeing some pictures of blue bags in people's trees and things like that. And
that was in March, a big storm.
Incredible.
And then we had the other storm, Helen Mary. Quitting her job at the university to go back into politics.
Yeah, that was a big news story.
It was Simon Thomas caught with these indecent images of children on his computer and had to stand down.
Yeah, and that must have been obviously it was a big shock to everybody, but also it must have come as a bit of a sort of a real surprise for Helen as well. I think
so. She had to obviously, make a big decision whether or not she stayed in a very well-paid job at Swansea University or went back into politics. And she made that choice to leave and take up her role in the Assembly. And there she is, larger than life again, at the forefront of politics for Llanelli.
Yeah, and obviously there's a possibility that she may well be standing in the next Assembly elections.
I think it'll be it'll be a close call. She came close last time to Lee Waters, and I think it'll be close if she does. Very close again.
Okay, those are some interesting stories there. No shortage of material where people have shown their interest and their enthusiasm and their passion for local news stories.
Yeah, we coming into May again, we had the Pirates event again. I don't know if you remember that, but that was massive. Again, loads and loads of pirates wandering the streets of Llanelli, a ship, going past on wheels. It was just like, it was a nice event.
Yeah.
We had one I went to that did come to Llanelli, but later on was Adrian Street, the wrestler. Joanne Randalls had released a film based on his life, and I went up to the film premiere up in Merthyr there, and Adrian was one of my childhood heroes. So I'd actually taken part in the film, so I'd done a piece for the film, and it was great to see it on the big screen. And then it was shown here in Llanelli again. Just an icon, Adrian Street, a fantastic wrestler and a lovely gentleman.
Fantastic. It's great to hear those sort of little nuggets of gold stories, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the one that stands out, obviously, is still ongoing, is Sandy Road. Massive issues with traffic backing up all the way down to, the other end of Pwll. And it's going to continue. Massive amount of homes being built along that corridor.
It's really grabbing people's attention, and for all the right reasons as well, I think.
I think it would have been something that would have influenced the voting at the general election. I think it's going to be something that influences the voting at the next 2021 AM Assembly elections as well. It's that big.
Yeah, and rightly so as well, because obviously the pollution levels are extraordinarily high, and they are quite worrying. Obviously, there's a lot of schools close by as well. People walk along the pavement areas there as well. It's a highly populated area, and the levels of noxious fumes around that area are really worrying a lot of people. Okay, Alan, we'll come back and talk a little bit more about some of the other stories that are sort of bouncing around and that have attracted your attention over the last 12 months. What's next on your list of memorable events that happened this year?
One of the biggest events had to be the OVO Energy Tour, where the winner of the Tour de France, Geraint Thomas, led out from Carmarthen Park and then Pembrey. I mean, it was just a massive event for the county.
It was
brilliant to see. I mean, I've been a cycling fan since I was a child. To see the Tour de France, entrance coming through your hometown, well, it's fantastic.
And then, of course, there was the women's race afterwards.
It was,
well,
yeah,
so
excellent.
That as well.
Yeah, it did. And we were there. We covered it from the start to the finish. I was up on Bethlehem Hill, I remember.
I was down in Carmarthen.
You covered it in Carmarthen at the velodrome for us.
Yeah.
We also got to speak to Chris Froome before he had that massive, nasty crash. Yeah. And we got to speak to Geraint Thomas as well. And then, obviously, following that, we had another celebration, which was the D-Day celebrations. Huge event, a massive event in Llanelli and across the UK and in France as well.
Yeah, that I think perhaps was one of the most, I suppose, poignant events of the year, because it really, really grabbed people's attention. It made people, I feel like, understand what sacrifices had been made at that time, and then they were pretty terrible things that had gone on.
I think so. We're seeing more and more now. The stories are coming, from those news media outlets of the time. Llanelli really did do itself proud for the D-Day celebrations, I have to say.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we moved on, and we had the Extinction Rebellion. I mean, that came as close to Llanelli as it could in 5 roads. We spoke to one of the organisers who sort of said, look, we're going to be stepping up our action in Wales, and very, very next day there they were on the streets of Cardiff, and we had Swampy in Carmarthen. That was quite an exclusive, really, because Swampy, as you know, was one of the massive figures in the Green Eco-Warrior movement, and he'd padlocked himself, or stuck himself to the bank in Carmarthen there. We were able to get a lovely interview with him too.
After he'd unstuck himself.
After he'd become unstuck, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we do get these people. July, it's always July is carnivals, Ponte Delice, Buryport, Llanelli, all over the place. There's carnivals everywhere.
Yeah.
And we attended those. And then there was the massive Pride event in Llanelli.
That was a pretty big event this year, wasn't it?
Huge event.
I was really, really surprised just how big an event that has become.
Yeah, it's snowballed, isn't it? I mean, it's something we've sort of attributed and expected in London, in Cardiff, and here it is.
You sort of expect it in Cardiff and big cities like that, but you don't necessarily expect the level of turnout that we had in Llanelli.
Yeah,
but what was interesting was that there were people coming from outside of Llanelli as well. People coming from Newport, Swansea, Bath, all of the surrounding cities to actually come to Llanelli. And that was great because they were obviously spending the money in the shops in Llanelli. They were staying in local hotels, and that must have been good for the economy.
I think a lot of people were surprised at the scale and the size of it. But that was one. In July, we also had the steam train coming through, and the steam fairs in Pembrey. We're seeing more of that now, these steam trains making their way down to through Llanelli, and so it was lovely watching those go past. I was on the banks there in Pembrey with the children, the family, watching it go by. Very, very nice to see.
Yes, I remember I was up in Lougher watching it come in through Lougher. It was an incredible sight, and one which youngsters these days don't see very often. So that was kind of special.
Yeah, I think August we had obviously the Merthyr rally with Brexit, Welsh independence, people calling for Welsh independence. I went up to that, spoke to a lot of people up there. This really was gearing up to be a political storm again. Brexit was just dominating throughout the year, and we'll talk about that in December in the election. Yeah. But I went up to Merthyr, a massive crowd up there calling for Welsh independence, as we know. Way off. We're still way off. If you're a fan of Welsh independence, then hang on to your seat. It's going to take some time.
Yeah, that's going to be a story that's going to ramble on through 2020, certainly.
Yeah.
We are today doing our Review of the Year programme from the production offices of Llanelli Online and Wales News Online here in John Street in Llanelli. And I'm joined by Alan Evans, who's the editor and a familiar voice here on Radio BGM as well. Alan, nice to see you today. Thank you very much for sparing the time to come and talk to us. We've had some interesting stories so far, and certainly the year showed no shortage of slowing.
Absolutely. We had the Buryport lifeboat station opening up, a massive investment in Buryport, and we had they just sent just about every lifeboat around the coast to come for the opening. That was just superb to see that, and it's going to serve the people of Llanelli, Buryport and further afield very well in the future. I don't know if you remember the Cofiwch Drewerin story, where the wall was vandalised again, and then all of a sudden we started seeing that familiar red slogan with the white writing appearing everywhere, online, on walls across Wales in support.
Yes, I remember that, and everywhere I look these days, you seem to see reminders of it everywhere, which that sort of poignant sort of reminder of it.
The story about the drowning of the village, obviously.
What I was amazed at was how quickly they managed to get some money together to repair the damage to the actual stone wall.
Yeah, it's a sore point for people. That was a massive issue at the time, and they want to remember it quite rightly.
Absolutely.
Something sad for the town. We had Wilko closing. That was the announcement, and thankfully, within a short space of time, through I think public pressure really on the company, they decided to give Wilko a reprieve.
Yeah, I'm really glad they did, because it would have left a massive hole in the town centre.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Because it is a very big shop, and it's a sort of central place where people go to for bits and bobs, household bits and bobs. Really, isn't it?
It was sad to see all the shelves emptying. I remember going in thinking, oh my gosh, look at this, everything's been taken away. And then seeing the joy on people's faces, really. And we did a few interviews, vox pops on people at the time, and public opinion was very strong. They wanted Wilko to stay.
Yeah, absolutely.
We saw that coming together again in September with floods across Carmarthenshire, people helping each other, offering accommodation for people with empty homes, being helped, people putting sandbags where people weren't in, or so on. So that was quite nice. And then we saw the opposite end to that in the young offenders in Llanelli. There was a potential of, I think it's still ongoing, planning permission for opening up a place there. Signs going up, no offenders here, and
that was quite a strange one, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's still ongoing, and we'll see what the outcome of that is. But on a happier note, I remember attending the Roald Dahl birthday celebrations at Llanelli Library, and that was fantastic. Children got to see the timeline of Roald Dahl and talk about his life and his books, and I definitely saw a massive sort of interest point from the children there at the time, and they were taking away lots and lots of Roald Dahl books to read. Yeah. One of my favourite authors.
Yeah, indeed. And I think it's so important for youngsters these days to become interested in books. All too often, there is this easy option to look at something online and not to even open the covers of a book.
Well, I think that's what the library really does. One of the most popular libraries in Wales, I believe, and that's where they come into their own, really, in putting on events like this. The librarians themselves put it on, and lots and lots of schools throughout Carmarthenshire attended and got to do that. It was nice to see.
Yeah, and long may it continue. I really hope that that does, because obviously there's been a lot of speculation over the future of libraries in general. And certainly in Llanelli, there's always been this sort of spectre hanging around Llanelli's libraries. Is it going to close, kind of thing, So it's nice to see that there is this lovely story where it shows that the library is being used and used to a really strong purpose as well. We're going to come back in just a few minutes. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other exciting stories that were making the news in 2019 here in Llanelli.
Well, you can't but fail to notice the World Cup, Rugby World Cup. Wales doing so well, coming so close.
Absolutely.
Massive success for Japan
Tremendous
in hosting it.
Disappointment, I think.
Very disappointing, but there we go. And England, playing very, very well. South Africa and New Zealand, the shock going out, really.
Yeah. It was just an occasion where I think everybody was sitting on the edge of their seats. They were watching it, and they were saying, yes, it's got to happen. But it just at the last minute, it just didn't sort of all come together, which is really disappointing, I think.
Yeah, we had. I remember going to a lovely little event in Pontiats with a sing along, really, where the community had come together. The old people had taught the young children in the schools songs.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And they all had this lovely tea party with the Welsh kicks and flags. They were all wearing their jerseys. That was a nice event.
It was.
We had the food festival, again, huge amount of stalls in Llanelli, and I'm like Llanelli again, putting that one on, just bringing sort of just about every form of food you can imagine. Every street in Llanelli was full.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if it was like that? We were on a food festival every weekend.
Yeah, it always amazes me. There's regardless of what people say, there is this tremendous community spirit still evident in
There's a thirst for that stuff.
Absolutely.
People want that food. People want those stalls.
Yeah, they love getting together and doing something a little bit out of the ordinary where children can get involved, especially if the weather's nice as well. And it's just people just coming together and having a bit of fun, and that's what it's all about. And I still think that people in Llanelli excel at that, and they do it very, very well.
Yeah. We had obviously the opening of the offices here that you're sitting in, Dave, with help from the Welsh Assembly Government, our own AM Lee Waters, Beth Ansayed, the chair of the Language Committee. This is where we are today. And
I mean, that was a big step as well for you, because obviously taking the fact that people want to hear and read more about what's going on in the area where they live in.
Well, BGM is a classic example of that. I mean, you've got the app now. People can listen to it online. They can listen to this, where across the road from the redundant start buildings, having ivy growing over the walls.
That's quite ironic, really, isn't it?
It is, but that's the way it is. I think that's the way the media industry has gone. If you're outside of Cardiff, forget it. They're not interested.
Yeah. It's certainly great to have you here, Alan, and I really hope that 2020 will be a really good year for you as well, because obviously it's still early days, but I'm sure that you've managed to judge the people's appetite for news here.
Well, it's important to stay. It's important to keep that light on Llanelli, and no greater light can be shone than the November Remembrance Day. You were there again, and a massive turnout again for that. It was a great day, I have to say. But we had the Winter Carnival in Llanelli again. I mean, when you compare compare it, Swansea's disaster last year.
Yeah,
and then this year again, it just seemed to be bigger than ever, Dave.
Absolutely. Swansea had a lot of bad press last year, didn't they? But I think they learned from some of the mistakes that they've made in previous years.
Yeah.
But obviously, Llanelli is certainly leading the way with Christmas celebrations and what have you. We really are showing other parts of Wales how well we can do it, and this is the way to go.
I think Llanelli can be justly proud at the end of 2019 that it has actually opened its doors, welcomed people in, and provided a huge amount of entertainment, but not just the entertainment. It has remembered. It always does the town proud, with these military parades and so on. And I think, I'm very optimistic for 2020. I'd just like to see a lot more investment. I'd like to see more shops opening. I'd like to see small businesses getting a lot more help. And I'd like to see the media getting a lot more help. I am optimistic.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think it's right to be optimistic as well, because as I've said, there is a huge appetite for news here in Llanelli. People always want to know about what's going on locally. So let's keep our fingers crossed that this will still continue throughout the new year. Obviously, we were ending the year really on a big news story, one of the biggest news stories of the year, really, which was the general election. And that really got people all excited about all kinds of things, in particular, Brexit.
Yeah, I mean, Brexit, obviously, and the general election, we covered it, and I think we did well. We gave a lot of Welsh language content coverage. But, I mean, I'm not so sure, Dave, Brexit was the main issue. I think we saw Labour, Nia Griffith, her majority reduced. We saw the Conservative wave sweeping the UK. But I'm really not sure that was all of Brexit. I think that people were... there were a protest vote against Jeremy Corbyn. I think there were fears that we might be going down the road of electing a prime minister and a government that might have a left-wing agenda. We might see industrial action, strikes and so on. Quite interestingly, the term used by a lot of people was, and the Conservatives afterwards, was that they were lending their vote to the Conservatives to see what happens. But hey-ho, here we are. We've got another maybe 8-10 years of Conservative government.
It really did manage to separate the people who were undecided from the people who were really decided.
It was quite astonishing watching the results coming in and seeing that landslide. And when that exit poll came in at 10 o'clock, yeah, I think you remember there was quite a lot of excitement around, and the Conservative candidates were very, very happy, weren't they?
I think it's one of the most exciting election nights that I can honestly remember.
Yeah.
It was really, really getting people on the edge of their seats. People were watching it at home on their televisions, listening to it on the radio. They were reading the reviews that people were being posted online. Twitter was going absolutely mad. And we were there as well, covering the event from the Llanelli election results end as well.
I think we're going to be sitting on our hands for a long time now. There's not going to be a lot to do politically. But looking at some other stories, one wonderful story was John Downing, local Llanelli boy, done good, press photographer, Fleet Street photographer, and received this honour from the Press Association. This is a guy who photographed, if you remember, the Brighton bombings, Margaret Thatcher and so on. I mean, he just went everywhere. And little known in the town, John Downing, Llanelli boy, but you go online, you put in John Downing, and you'll see what I mean from his photographs. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great one to sort of end the year on, really. I think what you're trying to do here on Llanelli Online is show a sort of a fair balance of news across the board.
We just want to keep the town on the map. We want to keep the spotlight shining. We want to keep people accountable, local government, our MP, our AM, and they'll tell you the same. You know, they're quite happy to see us here, and they're quite happy to answer our questions. So let's hope that we can continue through 2020 and... Longer than that as well.
Absolutely. Well, long may it continue, Alan. Thank you ever so much for sparing the time today. We've been looking back at the year that was 2019, and we hope that 2020 is going to be just as interesting a year. I'm sure you've got your little sort of book already filling up for the beginning of January.
I have indeed. Nadolig Clowing, blwyddyn newydd dda.
Indeed. Thank you ever so much, Alan. From us all on the programme, thanks for listening. And blwyddyn newydd dda I chi gyd. I hope that you have a very good new year.